My son locked me in a room, took my phone, and ignored my pleas to call an ambulance, thinking that this would allow him to receive his inheritance more quickly. I am an old, sick father, and he is a greedy heir who sees me only as an obstacle. But 3 days later, when he entered the room, what he saw made him scream. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The front door felt heavier than I remembered. 2 weeks in the hospital had weakened more than just my heart. My hands trembled as I turned the key. The familiar click should have brought comfort. Instead, it echoed like a warning. "Hello, kids. I'm finally home." Ethan didn't look up from his laptop. The living room chair, my chair, held him like he owned it, which I supposed he thought he did. "Yeah, I see that." Not exactly the welcome I'd imagined during those long nights, listening to machines beep and hum. Celeste emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her smile as thin as hospital coffee. "Oscar, you look better." The pause said everything her words didn't. I set down my suitcase and medical discharge papers, scanning the room that had been mine for 37 years. The family photos from the mantelpiece had vanished. The bookshelf held different books, newer ones, arranged by color rather than sentiment. Even the old lamp my Sarah had bought at that garage sale was gone. "Where are my things?" "We were just cleaning up, Oscar." "It was getting so cluttered," Celeste said, that practiced tone she used for deflecting uncomfortable questions. "Cluttered?" The word tasted bitter. Those were my memories. Ethan finally lifted his eyes from the screen. "Dad, we need to talk about this house's future." The future, as if I wasn't part of it, as if the surgery had been my funeral instead of my second chance. I wandered toward the garage, my surgical scar pulling tight against the bandages. The familiar ache in my chest wasn't from the operation this time. It was from seeing my life packed into cardboard boxes. Tools I'd used for 40 years, photo albums, Sarah's recipe cards, all labeled in Celeste's neat handwriting. Oscar's items, storage. Storage, like I was already dead. "Why are my things in boxes?" Ethan appeared in the garage doorway, blocking my path back to the house. "We thought you might be more comfortable in a different arrangement." "Different arrangement?" My voice cracked like old leather. "This is my house, son." "Actually, Dad, we've been thinking about that." He crossed his arms, the gesture making him look like a stranger, wearing my son's face. "You're not getting any younger. The stairs are dangerous for someone in your condition." The condition he'd never once asked about during my stay. Not one visit, not one phone call. "The doctor cleared me for normal activities." "The doctor doesn't live here." Ethan's tone carried an edge I'd never heard before, sharp, final, like a door slamming shut. "We do." We. Not you and me and Celeste. Just we, the couple who'd taken over while I fought to stay alive. The evening shadows stretched across the garage floor, reaching toward me like fingers. The house I'd built with my own hands suddenly felt like a tomb. My son stood there, watching me with eyes that held no warmth, no recognition of the man who'd taught him to ride a bike, to change oil, to be decent. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, each step a small victory over the pain in my chest. Behind me, I heard the soft murmur of conversation. Ethan and Celeste discussing something in voices too low to catch. Planning something, probably. Planning for a future that didn't include their inconvenient old man. The bedroom looked the same, at least. Same bed, same view of the street where Hal Jenkins waved from his porch every morning. Same family pictures on the nightstand, though fewer than before. I sat heavily on the mattress, the discharge papers crinkling in my lap. Tomorrow would be better. It had to be. Tonight was just the shock of coming home, the awkwardness of readjustment. Families needed time to heal, just like hearts did. But as I listened to the sounds below, the clink of dishes, the low rumble of the television, the comfortable domesticity of people who belonged, I felt more alone than I had in that sterile hospital room. The house settled around me with familiar creaks and sighs. Soon Ethan's footsteps moved across the kitchen floor, then up the stairs, then past my door without stopping. No good night, no checking if I needed anything, just the soft click of their bedroom door, sealing me out. I lay in the darkness, one hand pressed to my chest, where the surgeon had cracked me open and sewn me back together. The physical healing was almost complete, but something else had broken that I wasn't sure could be fixed. I woke to my chest feeling like someone was standing on it. The digital clock read 7:30 a.m., but the quality of light filtering through the blinds felt wrong. Too bright, too harsh. My mouth was dry as sandpaper, and when I tried to sit up, the room tilted sideways. This wasn't the normal soreness from sleeping in an unfamiliar position. This was the sharp, insistent pain Dr. Simmons had warned me about. If you experience chest pressure, shortness of breath, or sudden dizziness, don't wait. Call an ambulance immediately. I reached for the water glass on my nightstand, but my arm felt heavy as concrete. The simple motion of lifting my head sent waves of nausea crashing through me. Sweat beaded on my forehead despite the morning chill. The phone. I needed to reach the phone. It sat on the dresser across the room, a distance that might as well have been miles. When I tried to stand, my legs buckled, and I caught myself against the mattress, gasping. The surgical scar pulled tight, a reminder of how recently my chest had been split open, how fragile the repairs really were. The doctor said, "If it gets worse, ambulance," I whispered to the empty room, trying to remember the exact words, the precise symptoms that meant danger. This qualified. This definitely qualified. "Ethan!" My voice came out as a croak. I tried again, louder. "Ethan! Ethan, help me!" Silence. Then the distant sound of coffee brewing, the morning news murmuring from the kitchen television. Normal sounds of a normal morning for people whose hearts weren't trying to kill them. I made it halfway to the dresser before my vision went gray around the edges. The pain in my chest intensified, radiating down my left arm like fire. I grabbed the doorframe, my breathing coming in short, desperate gasps. "Ethan!" This time I put everything I had into it, the shout tearing at my throat. Footsteps below, unhurried. Then his voice, floating up from what sounded like the bottom of the stairs. "What is it, Dad?" What is it? As if I were calling about a leaky faucet or a burned-out light bulb. As if the desperation in my voice hadn't registered at all. "I feel terrible. Really terrible. Call an ambulance." Another pause. Longer this time. I pressed my back against the wall, sliding down until I was sitting on the floor, the phone still impossibly far away. My reflection in the dresser mirror showed a gray-faced old man with wild eyes and sweat-soaked pajamas. Sarah would have already been dialing 911. Sarah would have been holding my hand, talking me through it, making sure I knew I wasn't alone. But Sarah was gone, and I was trapped upstairs with a son who couldn't be bothered to climb 14 steps to check on his father's medical emergency. The pain spread across my chest like spilled acid. I remembered the surgeon's words about stress on the heart, about the delicate nature of the repairs, about how quickly things could go wrong in patients my age. The mortality statistics he'd quoted so casually, as if I were just a number in his success rate. "Ethan, please!" I called again, but my voice was weaker now, the strength draining out of me with each labored breath. This time, I heard movement, the deliberate scrape of a chair being pushed back, the measured footsteps of someone who wasn't in any hurry. Relief flooded through me, even as the pain intensified. He was coming. Finally, he was coming. The stairs creaked under his weight, each step slow and careful. Not the rushed ascent of someone responding to an emergency, but the pace of someone fulfilling an obligation. Still, he was coming. That's what mattered. I managed to pull myself up against the wall, trying to look less helpless than I felt. The last thing I wanted was to appear weak, even though weakness was exactly what this was, the fundamental fragility of a body that had already failed me once. "Dad?" His voice carried a note of mild concern, the way you'd ask about a neighbor's sick cat. "In here," I managed. "Hurry." The bedroom door opened and Ethan appeared in the doorway, still in his pajamas, hair messed from sleep. He looked at me slumped against the wall, took in the sweat and the pallor and the obvious distress, and his expression remained utterly calm. "What's wrong?" As if it weren't obvious, as if a man didn't call for an ambulance unless he was dying. "Call quickly! I feel terrible!" Ethan stepped into the room, his eyes scanning the scene with an odd detachment. He moved like someone evaluating a situation rather than responding to an emergency. His gaze lingered on my phone, then shifted to me, then back to the phone. "No, Dad, I won't call." The words hit me like ice water. "What are you saying? I could die." He walked past me to the dresser, picked up my phone, and slipped it into his pocket. The motion was casual, practiced, as if he'd rehearsed it. Maybe that would be for the best. The room went silent except for my ragged breathing. I stared at my son, my only child, the boy I'd taught to throw a baseball, whose scraped knees I'd bandaged, whose college I'd paid for, and saw a stranger wearing his face. "Ethan." "What?" The pain in my chest intensified, but now it felt like more than just my heart. Something fundamental had broken that had nothing to do with arteries or surgical repairs. "You're old, Dad. Sick? This house is worth $300,000, and Celeste and I have plans." He spoke with the same tone he might use to discuss the weather. Plans that don't include supporting an invalid. Invalid. The word cut deeper than any scalpel. "I'm your father." My voice came out as a whisper. "You're a burden." He moved toward the door with that same unhurried pace, and burdens have a way of resolving themselves. I tried to stand, to reach him, to grab him by the shoulders, and shake some humanity back into him, but my body betrayed me, legs giving out, arms too weak to support my weight. I collapsed against the wall, gasping. "Ethan, please, I need help." He paused at the threshold, looking back with something that might have been pity if there'd been any warmth in it. "No, Dad, you need to accept reality." The door closed. The lock clicked. Locked. He'd locked me in. "Ethan!" I pounded on the door with what little strength I had left. "Open the door! What are you doing?" His footsteps retreated down the hallway, down the stairs, back to his normal morning routine. Back to his coffee and his plans and his future that didn't include his inconvenient father. I slumped against the door, the pain in my chest now competing with a different kind of agony. The boy I'd raised, the son I'd loved unconditionally, had just sentenced me to death. Not with violence or anger, but with cold calculation, with the casual cruelty of someone swatting a fly. The room felt smaller now, the walls pressing in. No phone, no way out. And downstairs, the sounds of normal life continued. The television, the coffee maker, the comfortable domesticity of people planning a future built on my grave. I pressed my ear to the door, listening for any sign of conscience, any indication that he might reconsider. Instead, I heard him talking to Celeste, in low, satisfied tones, discussing something that made her laugh, a bright, careless sound that turned my blood cold. The surgical scar burned like a brand across my chest. All those machines, all those medications, all that careful monitoring to keep me alive, just so I could die alone, locked in my own bedroom, abandoned by the people I'd trusted most. But I wasn't dead yet. And despite the pain, despite the betrayal, despite everything my body was telling me about giving up, something stubborn and furious was awakening in the part of me that had survived 68 years, 2 wars, the death of my wife, and now this. If Ethan thought I'd die quietly, conveniently, he didn't know his father as well as he thought. I'd survived worse things than this. I'd survived him. The window faced Hal's house. Hal Jenkins, who'd lived next door for 15 years, who waved every morning, who'd asked about my recovery just last week. If I could get his attention. I crawled toward the window, each movement a small victory against the pain trying to drag me under. The glass was cold against my palm as I pressed myself up to see the street below. Hal's morning newspaper still lay on his driveway. He'd be out soon to collect it, coffee mug in hand, ready to start another ordinary day in an ordinary neighborhood where sons didn't lock their fathers away to die. All I had to do was survive long enough to get his attention. All I had to do was refuse to make Ethan's plan easy. The pain was real, dangerous, potentially fatal, but so was my son's betrayal. And between the two, I knew which one I was going to fight harder. The silence after his footsteps faded felt like death itself. I pressed my back against the door, sliding down until I sat crumpled on the floor like discarded laundry. The carpet beneath me, Sarah's carpet, the one she'd picked out during our 3rd year of marriage, felt rough against my palms. How did this happen? Where is that boy I raised? The question echoed in the emptiness of my skull, bouncing off memories that didn't make sense anymore. This was the same son who'd cried when he accidentally stepped on a spider at age 7. The same boy who'd hugged me so tight after his first Little League home run that I thought my ribs might crack. My chest felt like someone was tightening a vise around it, each breath a small victory against the pain radiating down my left arm. The doctor's words came back in fragments. Any sudden onset of symptoms, don't hesitate, could be fatal. Fatal. That was exactly what Ethan was counting on. My own son, does he really want me to die? The words came out as a whisper, barely audible even to myself. I remembered teaching him to ride his bicycle in the driveway below this very window. He must have been 6, maybe 7, with that gap-toothed grin and hair that stuck up no matter how much Celeste tried to tame it. When he finally managed those first wobbly solo yards, he'd turn back to me with such pure joy. "Did you see, Dad? Did you see me do it?" I'd been so proud, so impossibly proud of this little boy who shared my stubborn chin and my wife's gentle eyes. That child was gone. In his place stood a stranger wearing Ethan's face, a man who looked at his father and saw only an obstacle to financial freedom, a burden to be eliminated. Maybe I really did become a burden. The thought crept in like poison, spreading through my consciousness with sickening efficiency. Had I been demanding? Difficult? When I'd called from the hospital, asking when they might visit, had my voice carried that needy tone that made people want to run? When I'd mentioned feeling lonely, had it sounded like manipulation? The pain in my chest intensified, and I couldn't tell anymore where the physical ended and the emotional began. They'd merged into one massive weight, pressing down on everything I thought I knew about love, family, the basic human decency that separated us from animals. Through the window, I could hear the distant sound of a lawnmower, someone starting their ordinary Tuesday morning in an ordinary way. Life continuing as if the world hadn't just cracked open to reveal something rotten at its core. I forced myself to focus on breathing. In, out, the way the physical therapist had taught me after the surgery, counting the rhythm to keep panic at bay. But this wasn't surgical recovery. This was survival. The window caught morning light, casting long rectangles across the floor. From here, I could see Hal's house, his neat garden with its precise rows of vegetables. Hal, who'd waved from his porch just last week, asking how I was feeling, whether I needed anything from the store. Hal, who had no idea that his neighbor was trapped in his own bedroom, abandoned by his own blood. I pressed my palm flat against the floor and pushed, fighting dizziness as I struggled to my knees. The window was maybe 12 feet away, but it might as well have been 12 miles. Still, it was movement. It was forward. It was the only direction left. Crawling toward the window felt like crossing a desert. Each movement sent fresh waves of pain through my chest, but the alternative was lying still and letting Ethan's plan succeed. My surgical scar pulled tight against the bandages as I dragged myself across Sarah's carpet, using furniture legs for support. The window latch stuck, painted over years ago and rarely opened. My hands shook as I worked at it, sweat beading on my forehead from the effort. When it finally gave way with a rusty squeal, the morning air hit my face like a blessing. Hal's garden spread below me, neat rows of tomatoes and peppers catching the early sunlight. He knelt between the plants, wearing his old Northwestern University t-shirt and canvas work gloves, completely absorbed in checking for pests. "Hal!" My voice came out as a croak. The 2 weeks of intubation had left my throat raw, and the panic wasn't helping. "Hal, help me!" He looked up, squinting against the sun. "Oscar? What happened?" The relief of seeing his familiar face, of having another human being acknowledge my existence, nearly overwhelmed me. "Call an ambulance. Right now. I feel terrible." Hal dropped his trowel and stood immediately, brushing dirt from his knees. "What's wrong? Should I come up there?" "No, I'm locked in. Can't reach my phone." The words tumbled out in a rush. I couldn't tell him about Ethan, couldn't destroy what was left of my family's reputation in the neighborhood, but I could get help. I could survive this. "Locked in? How are you locked in your own bedroom?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. How could I explain that my son had imprisoned me? That the boy Hal had watched grow up, had congratulated on his wedding day, had turned into someone capable of elder abuse? "The door jammed," I lied, hating myself for protecting Ethan even now. "Please, just call. I think it's my heart again. I'm calling right now. Hold on." Hal was already moving toward his house, that quick, efficient stride of a man accustomed to handling emergencies. 15 years in the classroom had taught him to respond first and ask questions later. I gripped the window frame, leaning out as far as my weakened body would allow. The morning air filled my lungs, cleaner than the stale atmosphere of my prison. Below, Hal disappeared into his house, and I could see him through his kitchen window, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing animatedly as he spoke to the emergency dispatcher. Help was coming. After an hour of abandonment, of facing the possibility that I might die alone and forgotten, actual help was finally coming. But even as relief flooded through me, a new fear crept in. What would happen when the paramedics arrived? Would Ethan let them in? Would he maintain the fiction that I was fine, just a confused old man making trouble? He was smooth, professional, the kind of person authority figures trusted instinctively. "They're on their way," Hal called from his back door. "Ambulance should be here in 10 minutes. You just hang tight." 10 minutes. I could survive 10 minutes. Through the window, I watched Hal hurry back to his garden, then change his mind and walk to the front of his property, where he could watch for the ambulance. The sight of him standing guard, this near stranger who cared more about my welfare than my own son, brought tears to my eyes. The pain in my chest had shifted, becoming more manageable now that hope had returned. Adrenaline, probably. The body's way of keeping me conscious long enough to see rescue arrive. But then I heard it, the sound that turned my relief to ice. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps moving up the stairs toward my room. Ethan had heard me calling. He knew what I'd done. The footsteps paused outside my door, and I could picture him standing there, calculating his next move. How angry would he be? How far was he willing to go to protect his scheme? The lock clicked. The door exploded inward with such force it slammed against the wall. Ethan filled the doorframe, his face twisted with a rage I'd never seen before, not even during his worst teenage tantrums. His professional demeanor had vanished, replaced by something primitive and dangerous. "What did you do, you old fool?" I scrambled backward from the window, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Let me go! I need help!" He crossed the room in 3 quick strides, grabbing my shoulders and hauling me up with surprising strength. This close, I could see the panic behind his anger, the wild calculation of a man whose carefully laid plans were crumbling. "Listen to me, carefully." His grip tightened, fingers digging into the surgical site until I gasped. "If you tell anyone about this, I'll make your life hell. You're insane. You're my son. I'm your son who's waited for inheritance too long." The words exploded out of him like a dam bursting. "Do you know what it's like, watching you cling to life while Celeste and I scrape by? Living in this house like charity cases?" He shoved me back onto the bed, with enough force to jar my teeth. I landed awkwardly, pain shooting through my chest as my surgical site twisted. Above me, Ethan loomed like a stranger wearing my child's face. "Charity cases?" I struggled to catch my breath. "This is your home. I never asked for rent. Never—" "Because you wanted us dependent. Trapped." His voice climbed toward hysteria. "Well, guess what, Dad? I found a way out. We found a way out." The emphasis on "we" hit like a physical blow. Celeste wasn't just complicit. She was a partner in this. The woman who'd called me Papa at their wedding, who'd sent me cards every birthday, had been counting down the days until my death. "How long?" The question came out as a whisper. "How long have you been planning this?" Ethan's laugh held no humor. "Since the first heart attack. When the doctor told us you might not make it, and all I could think about was finally being free of this albatross around my neck." He moved to the window, peering down at Hal's property with the paranoid intensity of a cornered animal. "Who did you call? What did you tell them?" "I told them I was dying." "Because I am." "No." He spun around, pointing at me with an accusatory finger. "You told them lies. Made yourself look like a victim when you're just a stubborn old man who won't accept reality. The reality that my son wants me dead. The reality that you're 70 years old with a bad heart and no business holding up progress." His professional mask was completely gone now, revealing the calculating predator underneath. "That house is worth $300,000. $300,000? Do you know what Celeste and I could do with that money?" The casual way he discussed my death, as if it were a stock transaction or a business merger, made my skin crawl. This wasn't temporary madness or a moment of weakness. This was who my son really was, a man who saw his father as nothing more than an inconvenient obstacle to financial success. "I could change my will," I said quietly. "Leave everything to charity." His face went white, then red. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me." For a moment I thought he might hit me. His fists clenched, muscles tensing as he fought some internal battle between violence and calculation. Then the sound that saved me, or doomed us both, came drifting through the window. Sirens. Distant, but growing closer. Ethan's head snapped toward the sound, his expression shifting from rage to panic. "How long ago did you call?" "I didn't call anyone." Technically true. "My neighbor saw me in distress." "You lying?" He cut himself off as the sirens grew louder, clearly heading in our direction. His mind was working now, calculating odds and outcomes with the same cold precision he brought to his accounting work. "Here's what's going to happen," he said, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "You're going to tell them you had a panic attack, that you got confused and thought the door was locked when it wasn't. You're going to apologize for wasting their time. And if I don't?" His smile held no warmth whatsoever. "Then your final years are going to be very, very unpleasant. I control your medications, your meals, your access to the outside world. Cross me, and I'll make sure you understand exactly how powerless you really are." The sirens were almost here now, maybe 2 blocks away. Through the window, I could see Hal standing at the end of his driveway, waving them toward our house. Ethan straightened his shirt, running his hands through his hair to restore some semblance of normalcy. "Remember what I said, Dad. Every word of it." He walked toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and the door was never locked. You just forgot how to open it. Old age, you know? So confusing for everyone involved." The wail of sirens cut through the morning air like a knife through silence. From my position at the window, I could see the ambulance turning onto our street, its red and white lights painting urgent patterns across the suburban lawns. Relief flooded through me so completely that my knees nearly buckled. But then I saw Ethan emerge from the front door below, his movements quick and calculated. He'd smoothed his hair, straightened his shirt, and put on that professional mask he wore so well. The concerned son ready to handle an unfortunate misunderstanding. The ambulance pulled up to our curb with a hydraulic hiss. 2 paramedics climbed out, a woman in her 40s with graying hair and a younger man carrying medical equipment. They moved with the efficient urgency of people accustomed to life and death situations. Ethan intercepted them before they reached the front door. "Officers, I think there's been some kind of mistake," he said, his voice carrying that perfectly modulated tone of polite confusion. "Everyone here is healthy." "We received a call from this address," the female paramedic replied, her eyes scanning the house methodically. "Cardiac emergency, possible distress. Well, my father has been having some confusion since his surgery." Ethan's performance was flawless, the caring son dealing with an elderly parent's declining mental state. He sometimes imagines medical emergencies that aren't real. My chest burned with fury that temporarily overwhelmed the physical pain. Even now, even caught in his lies, he was trying to paint me as a confused old man. "I'm here," I shouted from the window, putting every ounce of strength into my voice. "Second floor, help me!" The paramedics looked up immediately, their professional attention focusing on my obvious distress. The woman stepped away from Ethan, craning her neck to get a better view. "Sir, are you experiencing chest pain?" she called up. "Yes, and I'm locked in my room. Can't get out." Ethan's mask slipped for just a moment, a flash of panic crossing his features before he regained control. He gets confused about the door handle sometimes. Old age, you know. I'll just go up and... "No." The male paramedic's voice cut through Ethan's explanation like a blade. "Sir, open the door immediately. We need direct access to the patient. But really, this isn't necessary. If you just let me... This is not a request." The woman's tone had shifted from professional courtesy to absolute authority. "We have a patient reporting cardiac distress and claiming to be trapped. You will provide immediate access, or we'll call for police backup." I watched Ethan's face cycle through a dozen expressions. Calculation, desperation, fury, resignation. He was trapped by his own lies, caught between his carefully constructed deception and the immovable force of medical protocol. "Of course," he said finally, his voice tight. "I'll unlock the door right away." But he didn't move. He stood there for precious seconds, his mind working frantically for some way to regain control of the situation. The paramedics noticed. "Sir, unlock the door now, or we will assume this is a case of elder abuse and call law enforcement," the woman said, her hand already moving toward her radio. Elder abuse. The words hung in the air like an accusation, and I saw Ethan flinch as if he'd been slapped. His carefully constructed world of plausible deniability was crumbling in real time. "Right away," he said, but his feet remained planted on the front lawn. The male paramedic had heard enough. He spoke into his radio with clipped professionalism. "Dispatch, we need police backup at this location. Possible elder abuse situation. Family member preventing access to patient." That broke Ethan's paralysis. No, that's not necessary." He practically ran toward the front door, keys jangling in his hand. "I'll open it right now." Through the window, I watched him disappear into the house, and moments later, I heard his footsteps on the stairs, slower than they should have been, each step a reluctant admission of defeat. The lock clicked, the door opened. "Dad?" His voice carried a forced note of concern, a performance for the audience that would surely follow. "The paramedics are here to check on you." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The sound of professional footsteps on the stairs, of equipment being carried up to save my life, was answer enough. When the female paramedic appeared in my doorway, her experienced eyes took in everything at once: my obvious distress, the suspicious circumstances, the locked door that had somehow confused me. "Hello, Oscar," she said gently. "I'm Sarah Chen, and this is my partner, Mike Rodriguez. We're here to help." Sarah? The same name as my wife. I chose to take that as a good sign. The emergency room blurred past in a stream of bright lights and urgent voices. Oxygen mask over my face, IV needle finding my vein with professional precision, the steady beep of machines monitoring every aspect of my failing cardiovascular system. Through it all, one thought kept circling in my mind like a predator. My own son tried to kill me. Dr. Laura Simmons appeared sometime during the second day, when the immediate crisis had passed and I was stable enough for conversation. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe mid-50s, with the kind of direct gaze that suggested she'd seen everything and wouldn't be easily fooled. "Oscar, your condition was critical when you arrived," she said, settling into the chair beside my bed. "A little longer without treatment, and we might be having a very different conversation. Thank you for saving me." The words came out automatically, but they carried weight I hadn't expected. Someone had cared enough to save my life when my own family had tried to end it. She nodded, but her expression remained thoughtful. The paramedics mentioned some unusual circumstances. A locked door? Family member trying to prevent access? I met her eyes steadily. My son and I had a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding, as if attempted murder could be reduced to a simple family disagreement. But I wasn't ready to destroy what remained of my family's reputation, not until I had a plan. "I see." Dr. Simmons made a note in my chart, but I caught the skeptical glance she shot my way. "We'll be keeping you for observation. The stress on your cardiovascular system was severe, and we want to ensure there are no complications." 2 days. 2 days to lie in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling tiles and processing the complete annihilation of everything I'd believed about my son. 2 days to replay every interaction, every conversation, looking for signs I'd missed. 2 days to understand that Ethan hadn't suddenly snapped. He'd been calculating my death for months, maybe years. The nurses checked on me regularly, their kindness a sharp contrast to the coldness I'd experienced at home. When they asked about visitors, I gave them the same answer every time. "Do you have any visitors we should expect?" Jennifer, the evening nurse, asked during her rounds. "No, and there won't be any." She looked surprised. "No family?" "None that matter." The phone beside my bed remained silent. No calls from Ethan asking about my condition. No flowers from Celeste expressing concern. Just the steady rhythm of medical equipment and my own thoughts turning darker with each passing hour. Ethan must answer for what he did. The thought crystallized during my second night, when sleep eluded me, and rage had settled into something colder, more purposeful. This wasn't about family anymore. This was about justice. This was about ensuring that what happened to me couldn't happen to some other vulnerable parent. I understood now that Ethan saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to his financial freedom. $300,000. That's what my life was worth to him. The price of my house minus the cost of my continued existence. But he'd made a crucial mistake. He'd let me live. By the morning of June 13th, I had a plan. Not the hot-blooded revenge of a betrayed father, but the careful, methodical approach of a man who'd spent 68 years learning how the world really worked. Ethan was smart, but he was also arrogant. He thought he was dealing with a confused old man who would either die quietly or be too ashamed to expose family secrets. He was wrong on both counts. "You're looking much better," Dr. Simmons said during her final check. "Heart rhythm is stable. Blood pressure is under control. I think we can discharge you this afternoon." "Good. I have things to take care of at home." She paused, pen hovering over the discharge papers. "Oscar, if there are any ongoing issues at home, there are resources available. Social services, elder advocacy groups." I smiled, but it wasn't a warm expression. "I can handle my family situation, doctor. But thank you." At 2 o'clock, I walked out of Northwest Community Hospital with a small bag of medications and a heart that beat steady and strong. The taxi driver who picked me up was chatty, asking about my stay, commenting on the nice weather. I barely heard him. My mind was focused on the afternoon ahead, on the phone calls I needed to make, the preparations that would ensure Ethan faced the consequences of his actions. The house looked exactly the same as I'd left it 3 days ago, but everything had changed. This wasn't my home anymore. It was a crime scene, and I was no longer the victim. I was the prosecutor. The taxi pulled away with a quiet purr, leaving me standing on the sidewalk in front of the house that no longer felt like home. Ethan's car was gone from the driveway, at work, most likely, pretending to be the grieving son whose father had suffered another medical emergency. Celeste's sedan was missing too, probably at her marketing job, maintaining the facade of normalcy. Perfect. I needed privacy for what came next. Inside, the house felt different. The same furniture, the same family photos that had been returned to their places. Guilt, perhaps, or just maintaining appearances. But the atmosphere had changed fundamentally. This was no longer a sanctuary. It was evidence of a crime. I climbed the stairs slowly, saving my strength, and went directly to my bedroom. The window was still open from my desperate calls to Hal. The carpet still bore the impression where I'd collapsed, fighting for breath, while my son plotted my death. From my dresser drawer, I retrieved the small digital recorder I'd bought years ago for capturing Sarah's stories about her childhood. She'd wanted me to preserve them for the grandchildren who would never come. Now it would serve a very different purpose. The device was simple, a silver rectangle no bigger than a playing card. I tested it twice, speaking clearly into the microphone, playing back my words to ensure the audio was crisp and clear. Technology had come a long way since my working days. Next, I gathered documents, medical records from my recent hospitalization, showing the severity of my cardiac distress, the discharge papers that proved I'd been in immediate danger, Dr. Simmons' notes about unusual circumstances surrounding my emergency. But the most important call came at 3:30. "Arlington Heights Police Department. How can I help you?" "My name is Oscar Reynolds. I need to report an elder abuse case." The operator's voice sharpened with professional attention. "What type of abuse, sir?" "Attempted murder. False imprisonment. My son locked me in my room during a medical emergency and refused to call for help." The words came out steady, factual without emotion, just the way they'd sound most credible. "Sir, when did this occur?" 3 days ago, June 11th. I have medical documentation and witness statements available." "And where are you now, Mr. Reynolds?" "At home. The perpetrator lives here with me." I paused, calculating timing. "If you could send officers tonight around 7:30, I'll have additional evidence for you." "Additional evidence?" "A recorded confession, if everything goes according to plan." The operator was quiet for a moment. "Mr. Reynolds, are you in immediate danger?" "Not immediate, no. But if you arrive at 7:30 tonight, you'll witness a crime in progress, and you'll have everything you need to file charges." I hung up before she could ask more questions. Too much detail would sound rehearsed, suspicious. Better to let them discover the truth as it unfolded. The recorder fit easily in my shirt pocket, the microphone positioned to catch conversation clearly. I tested the angles several times, recording myself from different positions around the room, playing back each attempt until I was satisfied with the audio quality. At 6 o'clock, I heard Ethan's car in the driveway. Showtime. I arranged myself in the living room chair, my chair, the one he'd claimed during my hospital stay, and waited. The front door opened with its familiar squeak. "Dad?" His voice carried a note of surprise. "You're home? Where else would I be?" He appeared in the living room doorway, still wearing his business attire, his face carefully composed into an expression of mild concern. The performance was flawless, if you didn't know what to look for. "How are you feeling? The hospital said you were stable, but stable enough to have some interesting conversations." I kept my voice level, almost conversational. About inheritance, about patience, about sons who wait for their fathers to die. His mask slipped just slightly, a tightening around his eyes, a pause that lasted a heartbeat too long. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do?" I smiled and saw him recognize something new in my expression, something that hadn't been there before his betrayal. "We both know exactly what you did. The question is whether you're man enough to admit it." Through the window, I could see a police car turning onto our street, moving slowly, professionally, timing their arrival with the precision I'd requested. Ethan followed my gaze and froze. "What did you do?" he whispered. I reached into my shirt pocket and clicked off the recorder. "Justice, son, something you forgot to teach yourself." At 6:30 sharp, I heard the familiar rumble of Ethan's sedan pulling into the driveway. Then Celeste's car, its engine ticking as it cooled. Car doors slammed with the casual authority of people returning to their domain, unaware that the rules had changed in their absence. The front door opened with its usual squeak, the same sound that had welcomed me home from work for 37 years, back when this house held love instead of lies. "Dad?" Ethan's voice carried that careful note of false concern he'd perfected over the past few days. "You're home already?" I remained seated in my chair, not his, hands folded calmly in my lap. The recorder in my shirt pocket felt warm against my chest, its tiny red light hidden but recording every word. "This is my house, son." He appeared in the living room doorway, still wearing his business suit, that mask of professional competence firmly in place. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes darted around the room as if checking for threats. "What were you thinking, leaving the hospital so soon?" The doctors cleared me. I kept my voice level, conversational. "Clean bill of health. Amazing what surviving attempted murder can do for a man's constitution." His face went white, then red. "That's not what happened, and you know it." "Do I?" I smiled, feeling the power shift that had been building for 3 days finally taking hold. "Refresh my memory, Ethan. What exactly did happen when you locked me in my room and refused to call for help while I was dying?" "You got confused. The door wasn't locked. You just couldn't—" $300,000. The number dropped into the silence like a stone into still water. "That's what you said my house was worth. That's what you and Celeste have been planning to get your hands on." Behind him, Celeste appeared in the hallway, grocery bags in her arms. She took one look at the scene unfolding and quickly disappeared toward the kitchen. Smart woman. Too smart to be caught in the crossfire when her husband's world collapsed. "You don't know what you're talking about," Ethan said, but his voice had lost its professional polish. Raw desperation was bleeding through. "I know exactly what I'm talking about." I leaned forward slightly, watching him flinch. "I know you've been waiting for me to die. I know you see me as nothing more than an obstacle to your financial freedom. I know you're willing to commit murder to get what you want." "Shut up." The words came out low and dangerous. "Just shut up, old man." Perfect. The recorder was catching every syllable. Or what? I pushed harder, feeling the satisfaction of a man who'd finally stopped being afraid. "You'll lock me up again? Try to finish what you started?" "I should have let you die." The explosion came exactly as I'd hoped it would. Raw, honest, completely incriminating. "Do you have any idea what it's like? Watching you cling to life while we're stuck in this house like prisoners? Waiting for you to finally do us all a favor and die?" I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. The recorder was getting every word of this confession, every admission of guilt that would seal his fate. "But you didn't let me die?" I said quietly. "Because you're a coward, Ethan. You wanted me dead, but you didn't have the courage to do it yourself. You just hoped nature would take its course while you played innocent." "Innocent?" He laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. "I've been innocent my whole life. Dutiful son, good student, responsible adult. And what did it get me? Trapped in my father's house at 42, dependent on your charity, waiting for scraps from your table. So you decided to help yourself to the whole meal. I decided to take what should have been mine years ago." His professional facade was completely gone now, replaced by the ugly reality underneath. "You had your time, Dad. Your house, your life, your choices. It's my turn now." Through the window, I caught a glimpse of movement on the street, right on schedule. "Your turn?" I stood slowly, my body steady and strong despite everything he'd put me through. "Let me tell you whose turn it really is, son." The doorbell rang. Ethan spun toward the sound, confusion replacing anger on his face. "Who could that be?" I reached into my shirt pocket and clicked off the recorder. "It's job complete. Justice, Ethan. Something you seem to have forgotten about." The doorbell rang again, followed by 3 sharp knocks that carried the unmistakable authority of law enforcement. Ethan's face shifted from confusion to understanding to pure panic in the span of seconds. "What did you do?" he whispered. I walked to the front door with steady steps, my heart beating strong and sure. Through the peephole, I could see 2 officers in Arlington Heights, police uniforms. A woman in her 40s, with sergeant's stripes, and a younger man with kind eyes and a serious expression. "Oscar Reynolds?" the female officer asked when I opened the door. "I'm Sergeant Maria Gonzalez. This is Officer Derek Patel. We received your call about an elder abuse case." "Yes, I called you." I stepped aside to let them enter. "I have evidence." Behind me, I heard Ethan's sharp intake of breath, the sound of a man realizing he'd walked into a carefully laid trap. "Evidence?" Sergeant Gonzalez's professional gaze took in the scene, the comfortable living room, the well-dressed son who looked like he'd seen a ghost, the elderly father who radiated calm determination. I reached into my shirt pocket and produced the small silver recorder. Recorded confession, threats of violence, admission of attempted murder through medical neglect. "That's not..." Ethan started forward, then stopped as Officer Patel's hand moved to his belt. "Let's hear it," Sergeant Gonzalez said. I pressed play. Ethan's voice filled the room, clear and damning. "I should have let you die. Do you have any idea what it's like, watching you cling to life while we're stuck in this house like prisoners?" The color drained from Ethan's face as his own words condemned him. "That's taken out of context. He was provoking me." "Keep listening," I said quietly. "I decided to take what should have been mine years ago. You had your time, Dad. It's my turn now." Sergeant Gonzalez exchanged a look with her partner. 20 years on the force had taught her to recognize genuine evidence when she heard it. "Sir, can you tell us what happened on June 11th? Officer Patel asked, his notebook already out. "My son locked me in my bedroom during a cardiac emergency and refused to call for medical help," I said, my voice steady and factual. "He admitted he wanted me to die so he could inherit my house. When I managed to get a neighbor's attention, the paramedics found me trapped and in severe distress." "He's lying?" Ethan's voice cracked with desperation. "He's a confused old man who doesn't understand what really happened." "We have the paramedic report," Sergeant Gonzalez said, consulting her notes. "Emergency responders documented a locked door and family member attempting to prevent medical access. That matches Mr. Reynolds' account." From the kitchen doorway, Celeste appeared with a suitcase in her hand. She'd been listening, and she'd made her choice. "Officers, I can confirm my husband's behavior," she said, her voice shaking. "I tried to stop him, but he said it would be better if Oscar just died naturally." Ethan spun toward her, betrayal written across his features. "Celeste, what are you doing?" "What I should have done 3 days ago." She looked at me with something that might have been remorse. "I'm sorry, Oscar. I should have protected you." Officer Patel stepped forward, his handcuffs already in hand. "Ethan Reynolds, you're under arrest for elder abuse, false imprisonment, and conspiracy to commit harm to a vulnerable adult." You have the right to remain silent, Sergeant Gonzalez continued as her partner secured the handcuffs. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. I watched my son, my only child, the boy I'd raised and loved and provided for, being read his rights in the living room where he'd once opened Christmas presents and celebrated birthdays. The weight of it should have crushed me, but instead I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: peace. "This isn't over," Ethan shouted as they led him toward the door. "I'm your son, your only family." "No," I said quietly, but loud enough for him to hear. "My son would never have tried to kill me for money. I don't know who you are." The door closed behind them with a soft click, taking with it the last remnants of the family I thought I'd known. Celeste stood in the hallway with her suitcase, tears streaming down her face. "I'll be gone by tomorrow," she said. "Divorce papers will be filed by the end of the week." I nodded. "That's probably best." She paused at the door. "He wasn't always like this, you know. The greed, it consumed him." I know. And I did know. Somewhere inside that angry, desperate man was the little boy who'd once hugged me after every little league game, win or lose. But that boy was gone, replaced by someone I couldn't save and wouldn't try to. The house fell silent around me, but it wasn't the terrifying silence of abandonment. It was the blessed quiet of justice served and truth acknowledged. For the first time in months, I was truly alone, and it felt like freedom. 17 days later, I stood at the same window where I'd once called desperately for help. But now I was looking toward a future I'd chosen for myself. The for sale sign on my front lawn caught the morning sunlight, a symbol of the new life I was building from the ashes of the old. The legal proceedings had moved with surprising speed. Ethan's plea bargain included 2 years probation, community service, and a permanent restraining order that prohibited him from contacting me. The elder abuse conviction would follow him for the rest of his life, a fitting consequence for a man who'd forgotten that family meant protection, not predation. "Justice has been served," I said to the empty room, and the words felt true in a way that satisfied something deep in my soul. My phone rang, interrupting the peaceful silence. The lawyer's voice was crisp and professional. "Oscar, the new will is finalized. Your son is no longer an heir, and the house sale proceeds will fund your new living arrangements, plus a substantial charitable donation to the Elder Abuse Prevention Society." "Thank you, Margaret. This feels right." After hanging up, I walked through the rooms that had witnessed both love and betrayal. The house would sell quickly. 3 bedrooms in a good neighborhood, recently updated kitchen, no family drama to complicate the transaction. The realtor had been impressed by how clean and organized everything looked. I'd spent the past 2 weeks methodically removing every trace of Ethan and Celeste's presence. Their belongings sat in storage boxes, waiting for them to collect. I wouldn't throw away their lives the way they'd tried to discard mine, but I wouldn't keep reminders of their betrayal either. The assisted living community I'd chosen was modern, bright, and full of people who understood that aging didn't mean giving up. My deposit was paid, my moving date set for next month. For the first time in years, I was excited about the future. A knock at the door interrupted my planning. Through the window, I could see Hal Jenkins standing on my porch with a plate covered in aluminum foil. "How are things, Oscar?" he asked when I opened the door. "Better than ever, Hal. Much better." His smile was warm with genuine affection. "Sandra made too much pot roast again. Thought you might enjoy some." I accepted the plate gratefully. In the weeks since Ethan's arrest, Hal had become a true friend, stopping by for coffee, helping with small repairs, treating me like family should have treated me all along. "Would you like to come in?" "Can't stay long, but sure." He settled into the chair that used to be Ethan's domain. "Read in the paper that your son got sentenced. Must be tough." "It was the right thing," I said simply. "Sometimes doing right means letting go of what we thought we wanted." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, 2 old men who understood that friendship was about presence, not conversation. Through the window I could see children playing in the street, their laughter carrying on the summer breeze. "You know," Hal said eventually, "there's a poker game at the community center Thursday nights. Bunch of us old-timers trying to remember how to bluff. You interested?" I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. I'd like that very much. After he left, I walked through the house one more time, saying goodbye to the memories worth keeping and releasing the ones that had only brought pain. In 6 weeks, someone else would call this place home. Someone who would fill it with laughter instead of lies, love instead of resentment. The afternoon sun streamed through the living room window, warming the space where I'd once fought for my life and won something more valuable than survival. I'd won back my dignity, my agency, and my right to choose how my story would end. My phone buzzed with a text from the assisted living director. "Your apartment is ready whenever you are. Welcome to your new chapter." I typed back, "See you soon. Ready to begin." Outside, a cardinal landed on the windowsill, its red feathers brilliant against the glass. Sarah always said cardinals were messengers, signs that loved ones were watching over us. Whether or not that was true, I chose to take it as a good omen. At 68, I was starting over. Not because I had to, but because I'd learned that it's never too late to demand better from life, to refuse to accept cruelty disguised as family, to fight for justice even when it costs everything you thought you wanted. The house around me felt peaceful now, no longer haunted by betrayal, but blessed by the knowledge that truth had triumphed over manipulation, that courage had defeated cowardice, that an old man could still be strong enough to save himself. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new possibilities, new reasons to keep choosing hope over bitterness. But today, in this moment, I was exactly where I belonged, free, vindicated, and ready for whatever came next. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.